Yo, what's up you guys, Vintran here, and these are my Nisi Athena primes. But what makes a cinema lens different than a photo lens? What are the benefits of using cinema lenses, and should you be using cinema lenses over photo lenses? Let's talk about it. Now, most of us, including myself, are using photography lenses for both our photo and video needs. However, I recently got a deal on these Nisi Athena primes. Then I found myself asking why I don't use cinema lenses more often, cause I am a cinematographer. Now, there are many differences in many different aspects, so I'm going to be going category by category, and I'll leave the chapter timestamps in the description for your reference. First is going to be the mount of the lenses. Most photography lenses are built and only used for specific mount types. Now, this is partially true for cinema lenses as well. If I bought a Sony 24-70 f2.8, it is built and intended to be used on Sony cameras with native E-mount. With cinema lenses, we get the ability to also get a PL mount, which is a universal mount, meaning that these Nisi Athenas in a PL mount like I have here can be used on Sony, Red, ARRI, Canon, or even a Nikon. And for me, that's perfect since no matter what camera my indecisive self ends up choosing on using, I know that I'll always have a full set of lenses that I can use from camera to camera. That brings me to the physical features. On a cinema lens, we have markings on the outside of the lens marking focus distance and aperture readings. At a glance, we can see how far the lens is currently focused as well as what aperture we're at. Compared to photography lenses, although they are more sleek looking with almost no markings on it, it's not as utilitarian for pulling focus, and we can't see how far the lens is currently focused without having to look at our monitor. Aside from the markings, we also see that cinema lenses are geared versus having a soft rubber like we do with photography lenses. Since cinema lenses are intended to be used with a follow focus or some type of focus motor, it's more advantageous to have lenses that are already pre-geared to accept focus motors versus having to attach one like we would on photography lenses. On a similar note, the placement of the rings are uniform on cinema lenses. As long as they are within the same manufacturer or lineup, it's simple for lens swaps. On a film set, time is money. If you not only had to switch the lens, but also adjust where the motors are placed, then it will take you long to do what is considered a simple task. With that, the physical dimensions are also similar across cinema lens families. For these Nisi Athenas, they all have the same gear placement, same diameter, same size, as well as the same weight. Again, having similar weights makes it easy for lens swaps, but this time on a gimbal. Having lenses with little weight difference means that I don't have to rebalance the gimbal every time I swap a lens as well. Now, we can't forget build quality. Photography lenses are intended to be much lighter for carrying around on different shoots. However, it comes with the cost of feeling just lesser quality in the hands. Cinema lenses, however, are absolute tanks across the board. I haven't stumbled upon a set of cinema lenses that didn't feel good in the hands and that I didn't feel could take a fall on set. These Nisi Athenas are solid with all metal components. However, the trade-off being I would much rather have a backpack full of photography lenses versus a backpack full of cinema lenses, as they are much heavier. With that, we should also talk about the focus throw of the lens. The throw of a focus ring refers to the amount of rotations it takes to get from the minimum focus to infinity focus. On a photography lens, if you were manually focusing, you would only have to turn about 90 to 120 degrees to get from end to end. However, for videos, we want our focus to be smoother in the event we need to do a rack focus mid-shot. To do this easier, cinema lenses have longer throws, usually 270 to 360 degrees, with these Nisi Athenas being at 330 degrees. This also has the benefit of really being able to hone in the focus distance, whereas photography lenses, we're turning it by hairs to dial in the focus. Something that originally was unique to cinema lenses, but is becoming more and more prevalent in all photography lenses as well, is a dedicated aperture ring. Some photography lenses still don't have it, like my Lumix lenses, but on something like these Sony G Master lenses, they have a dedicated aperture ring. However, cinema lenses have a declicked aperture ring. This is perfect for adjusting exposure changes mid-shot. So instead of changing a V&D or your ISO, you could just slowly turn the aperture ring as you go from outside to inside, for example. Now, let's talk about image differences between these lenses. Starting with the measurements of aperture. Photography lenses will use f-stop, but cinema lenses are using t-stops. F-stop measures the amount of light coming into the lens. However, t-stops measure the light actually getting through the lens and hitting the sensor. All in all, t-stops are much more accurate since it takes into account the real-world factors such as quality of glass, lens coatings, and how much light can be lost through transmission in getting to the sensor. And with that, when you're adjusting the aperture on a photography lens, it is electronically changing the position of those aperture blades, noting that the exact position of the aperture will never be exactly the same. it will be roughly. With cinema lenses, those blades will be at the precise point every time. So T2.8 is T2.8 on Monday when you shoot talking heads, or Thursday when you're filming some pickup shots. Then we have focus breathing. Focus breathing is a phenomenon that occurs when we're racking focus. We see the field of view slightly widen or narrow as the lenses focus. With photography lenses, this isn't a huge issue since we would focus on the subject and snap a single image. But with video, it's a little jarring for the viewer to see a slight warp in perspective as the lenses focus. Now, cinema lenses like these Athenas still have a little focus breathing. However, it's much better than their photography counterparts. The only way you're gonna see no focus breathing is buying something like RE signature primes, which if you can afford those, then you shouldn't be watching these videos anyways. But most cinema lenses will combat this better than photography lenses do. There are some firmware updates that you can do to help combat the focus breathing. I know Sony and the 35mm G Master has a focus breathing profile that you can apply and help mitigate that problem, but it's another step in post-production. And then we have focus itself, and for most is a deal breaker. Simply put, photography lenses have autofocus motors inside of them. Cinema lenses have no autofocus motors inside of them, and instead rely on something like a motorized follow focus or a LiDAR focusing system. I personally don't mind pulling focus whether or not I'm on a gimbal, but for some who may not be as comfortable with that skill, photography lenses have autofocus and is a much better route. Rounding out the differences is consistency in colors. Manufacturers of photography lenses are just trying to crank out lenses. They will make a really good 24mm and then a really good 85mm, then a really good 70-200. Each lens is standalone in their eyes. However, with cinema lens manufacturers, they consider lenses to be full lineups or families. Like we mentioned earlier, they want all their lenses in their lineup to look the same. They have the same dimensions, same ring placement, and also render colors the same way. Something that you may not realize is that every lens renders colors slightly different. Hence, for camera comparisons, you'll see most YouTubers use the same model lens amongst the two cameras. Cinema lenses tend to render colors the same no matter what focal length you're at. Again, with these Nisis, whether I'm at 14 or 85, the colors all render the same, which again cannot be said about the photography lenses. Lastly is price. Again, it's not always the case, but for a solid set of cinema lenses, you'll be paying 2 to 3 times more than their photography counterparts. However, with all the things we mentioned in this video, I find these lenses to actually be pretty worth it. These Nisi Athenas are about $1,200 a lens or $6,000 for the full set of 5 lenses. And when you compare that to a Canon RF lens or a Sony G Master lens, these Nisi lenses are actually pretty affordable. But know that it does take more rigging like adapters and focus motors, whereas with the photography lens, you just stick it on the camera and you're ready to film. And so then that brings me back to the big question of, should you be using cinema lenses for filmmaking? I would say yes, but there are some caveats. If you are a video first person and value the benefits of having cinema lenses while already owning a full set of photography lenses, then you should definitely snag some cinema lenses, such as myself. However, if you're a photo first person or a hybrid shooter, I still think photography lenses are a much better investment, and you can live with the cons of these lenses. Overall, cinema lenses are nice to haves, not need to haves. Pair photography lenses with some great autofocus and some time in post-production, and the end result will look basically the same. Not to mention, if you're a solo creator or a run and gun filmmaker, autofocus is immensely more beneficial than the performance boost in, say, focus breathing. But that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and if you think you're gonna buy a set of cinema lenses. Again, I love all of my lenses and use them on a daily basis, so I'll leave some links to them down in the description below. They are affiliate links. But as always, I'll catch you guys next time.